자, 이집트에 직접 가보지 않은 사람이라도 뭐 피라미드, 스핑크스, 미라에 대한 이야기는 다 알고 계시죠?
그럼요. 4대 문명기 중에 하나니까요.
4대 문명에 뭐가 있죠?
메소포타미아 문명, 이집트 문명.
방화 문명, 인더스 문명. 예. 근데 그 가자 피라미드 있잖아요. 이집트에 있는. 그게 세계 7대 불가사의 중에 현존하는 건축물 중에 유일하다고 하더라고요. 예.
그러니까는 20년의 세월에 걸쳐서 10만 명의 인원이 동원해서 만들었다는 그 사실 자체만으로도 저는 이게 불가사의가 아닌가.
참 잘했어요. 오늘 공부를 참 많이 하신 것 같아요. 그래서 이집트 대사님이 방송을 보면 아주 뿌듯해하실 것 같아요. 이번 주 게스트가 이집트 대사님 하니 셀림 라빕이죠. 네. 근데 최근에 이집트에 역사적인 사건이 있었잖아요. 그 시민들의 혁명으로 30년 만에 철권 통치가 무너졌어요.
아직 뒷수습이 끝난 것 같지가 않더라고요.
그래서 당분간은 피라미드의 나라보다는 민주화 혁명으로 더 이동세를 타게 하는 것 같습니다.
그리고 이집트 하면은 죽기 전에 꼭 가봐야 할 나라로 손꼽히는 나라인데 이집트 여행을 준비했던 그 사람들한테는 지금은 현재는 이집트 상황이 어떤가 이것도 되게 궁금할 것 같아요.
아무래도 치안이 불안하면 관광 산업이 좀 타격을 받잖아요. 근데 이집트가 최근 관광 산업뿐만 아니라 경제도 많이 성장했다고 해요.
네, 혁명이 일어나기 전까지 그 포스트 브릭스로 주목받았었어요.
아랍의 봄 직전까지만 해도 경제 성장률이 5% 넘었다고 해요.
작년에 자주 접했던 아랍의 봄에 대해서 좀 더 구체적으로 짚고 넘어가야 되지 않을까.
아랍의 봄은 2010년 12월부터 중동과 북아프리카에서 일어난 반독재 시위들이죠.
2010년 12월에 그제 무슨 일이 있었는데요?
찾아보세요.
그게 아마 티니지에서 시작된 거죠?
이제는 우리나라와 그 이집트의 관계를 한번 짚어보죠. 한국과 이집트는 수교를 맺은 게 95년도였어요. 사실 기간으로 보면 오래된 관계는 아니죠.
70년대 중반까지는 우리나라보다는 오히려 북한하고 훨씬 더 긴밀한 관계였으니까요.
중동 전쟁 때 북한이 이집트 군사주업 많이 했다고 하더라고요. 북한이 제3세계랑 수교도 만들었죠.
그래도 70년대 중반 이후부터는 그 문호 개방 정책 펴면서 우리나라하고도 경제 교류를 조금씩 시작했어요.
지금은 이집트에서 한국 자동차 점유율이 40%대라고 들었거든요. 네.
가전제품도 이제 메이드 인 코리아 그럼 인기가 제일 높은데 최근에는 방위산업 기술까지 뭐 수출을 한다고 하니까 이만하면 굉장히 가까워진 거라고 할 수 있죠.
그리고 이집트 그 국립중앙도서관에 생긴 최초의 외국관도 한국관이에요.
점점 가깝게 느껴지는데요. 고대 문명의 나라 이집트. 키워드 충분히 나왔으니까 정리하고 넘어가죠. 자, 첫 번째는 아무래도 지금 이집트의 상황이 어떤지.
내전 상황.
상황일까요?
네.
그리고요.
의외로 참 우리나라하고 수교를 늦게 맺은 국가 중에 하나인데 그러니까 역사적으로 우리나라하고의 관계는 어떻게 변화되어 왔는지 뭐 이런 거를 짚어보는 거죠.
한국과의 관계 변화. 하나 더 안다면요?
그리고 그 이집트의 성장 가능성에 대해서도 대사님께 좀 듣고 싶어요.
대사님과 뭐 과거와 미래 이야기까지 아주 다양하게 나눌 수 있을 것 같아요. 좋은 기회가 될 것 같아요.
Egypt, the birthplace of a great ancient civilization and a dream destination for tourists around the world. The country underwent a turbulent period recently, but it has now overcome its internal crisis and is preparing for a new future. So today's guest on Heart to Heart is His Excellency Dr. Hani Selim, Egyptian ambassador to Korea. Ambassador, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me in your program.
And also, not only you're welcome to Heart, but you're really welcome to Korea. You just recently were appointed ambassador,
Exactly.
right?
I was appointed last October as ambassador, and I'm actually very happy for this opportunity to enjoy living in your beautiful country and do something in order to enhance the relations with Egypt.
Well, last summer actually was quite a turbulent period in Egypt, wasn't it? You had some anti-military protests, but how have things progressed since then?
Well, actually, let me comment on the term of anti-military protests.
Okay.
Actually, these were not anti-military protests, and they were not protests in the first place. They were criminal activities committed by people who felt frustrated because of the failure of their project.
Okay.
They are Egyptians, and we have to contain them at the end of the day. And their protest actually was not against the military, but it was actually against the falling down of a regime that they dreamt of governing and controlling Egypt, and through Egypt to control many other parts of the world. The situation is improving very much in Egypt gradually, or let me say it has improved so much after all the determination and the resilience that the Egyptian people and the Egyptian government showed in following a democratic roadmap for the transformation of the nation. Egypt now has recuperated this crisis. Egypt now is already on the forefront in order to get along with its position as a pivotal and a pioneer nation in its part of the world and in the whole world.
So with these turbulent times in the summer and this reconstruction sort of period, Egypt as a country really does seem to be undergoing a transformation, maybe a national rebuilding. Is that too much of a stretch, or?
That's right. As you know, Egypt has passed through 2 revolutions in less than 3 years. And this is actually something unique in the history of mankind. In 2011, the Egyptian people revolted against a regime that did not meet and respond to the democratic aspirations of the people, nor for their aspirations for social justice and a better community and a better society to live in. We thought that we would get that regime or that system which we dreamt of after the revolution. Unfortunately, we had another frustration, so we had to revolt again in the 30th of June 2013 against a regime which, although it came through elections, but actually elections were used as a means in order to control the nation and create a dictatorship under the name of religion. So the aspirations of Egyptian people are actually the aspirations of rebuilding the nation, of rebuilding the society, of rebuilding the conscience of the Egyptian people in a way that would correspond to our hopes to be a real democratic nation, a nation where everybody enjoys social justice, enjoy an equitable opportunity to live in an honorable way in his own country and in his own land.
But as you just said, it underwent 2 revolutions in a very short period of time.
Yes.
Is there any risk of another revolution in the near future?
Well, this is something that you cannot guarantee. It depends
Right.
on the
You
new
can't
government. If
look
the new
forcing,
government
yeah.
respond to the aspirations of the people, then there will be no revolution. But I'm sure that the new government and the new system which was established actually was established by the revolution of the 30th of June, when more than 33 million people came out to welcome a new life and a new era in the history of Egypt. So I actually hesitate to think that those millions would once more revolt against a system and a new state of Egypt that they brought themselves, and they fought for it.
Well, His Excellency Dr. Selim became the Egyptian ambassador to Korea just a short few months ago. And so he's very busy these days. It seems like 24 hours a day isn't enough for him. Let's follow him on one of his typical days. Ambassador Hani Selim Labib of Egypt is getting used to life in Korea. It's only been 3 months, but his days are full. Today, the embassy is expecting a special guest.
I am receiving a Korean activist who is working in the field of helping children with special needs and disabled children in Egypt. And she will be visiting me together with a coordinator from Egypt in order to discuss the future of their activities in my country.
Korean hospital officials, doctors from Egypt, and the ambassador are working together to help the disabled in Egypt.
I think there is a very good chance to cooperate and to develop our staff and train our doctors in Egypt through medical facilities here and through exchange of experiences and expertise between the medical staff here and Egypt.
For them to cooperate successfully, Ambassador Hani Selim Labib's diplomatic expertise is crucial.
I wish to accomplish one of my high priorities for this year, and that is, as I said before, I consider that culture is the gateway to enhance cooperation in the relation between our two nations. So I intend to organize Egyptian Cultural Week. We are looking forward to celebrate this kind of cultural event in order to promote Egypt in Korea.
I imagine a large part of your initial activities as ambassador is explaining what's going on in Egypt. Is that right? Many people are still very curious?
Actually, that's right. But after all these months, after the establishment of a new regime and the establishment of the new revolution and the outcome of this revolution, I think people are more confident about the transformation which happened in Egypt. So it's becoming less and less curious about knowing about the history of what happened, but people will continue to be curious about knowing on Egypt as a country, as a nation, as a touristic site, as a cultural entity, as a civilization. I think the whole world will never stop to be curious about that. But about what happened, I think people are getting less curious.
Okay. They are anxious to return to Egypt, right, as tourists.
Of course. I can say that for the Koreans which I met with, actually, whether from the tour agents, from the professionals working in the tourism industry, or the normal people, I think that the expression anxious is less than the reality. They are eager and with great love, they want to go back to Egypt and enjoy it again.
How big is tourism anyways? How much of a contribution does it make to the national GDP? Is it a major industry?
The significant portion of the national income of Egypt comes from tourism. It is #1 source of revenue.
Is that right?
And that's normal if this is a country where 1/3 of the ancient monuments of the world exist. So that would be something normal and logic.
Did you have a big hit in the number of tourism and tourism revenue then because of the recent disturbances and upheavals?
Actually, the flow of tourism from the whole world witnessed a significant decline because of the incidents which took place, and because, actually more than that, because of a media campaign which was not very much constructive and objective in monitoring the situation and reflecting it to the international public opinion in the right way. But now the reality is there for everybody to see, for everybody to live, and for everybody to enjoy.
Because it's a fact that you have lifted your state of emergency. You've also reopened St. Catherine's Monastery. Egypt is absolutely ready to receive visitors and tourists again, right?
And I have to say that more than 14 to 15 countries until now have already lifted their travel cautions to Egypt. And I'm speaking about major destinations of tourism from the whole world to Egypt. And also we are very much appreciative to the decision taken by the Korean government to also lift the ban on or the caution, the travel caution on tourism from Korea to Egypt. Actually, we are looking forward. We have started already to witness resuming the flows, and we hope that very soon they will reach back not only the same levels, but even more than the previous levels.
Could this actually be a best time or an even better time to visit Egypt for first-time visitors? Because I imagine many people in Egypt are eager to, to receive visitors again. Are there special deals, special events going on to receive visitors?
The high season and the peak for tourism in Egypt is this time of the year.
Winter, then.
Winter.
Usually winter.
Because this would give a chance for the tourists, particularly coming from a cold nation, to visit the most important touristic sites in Egypt, which are in Upper Egypt. Because Upper Egypt in winter time is a heaven. In winter time, the temperature in Upper Egypt could reach in the morning 25 and 26 degrees centigrade, and in the evening it never get below 15 or 12 degrees centigrade.
How hot does it get, though, during the daytime?
It never gets above 25 degrees centigrade.
Oh, that's the high, then.
Uh-huh.
That sounds heavenly.
In summertime, it is a little bit different. The temperature is higher. Sometimes it reaches 35 or 36 degrees centigrade, but nevertheless, the flow of tourism continue. But for the convenience of tourists, particularly from cold countries, they prefer to visit these sites in wintertime. This also includes the Red Sea coast, which I assure you, within my job, I had a chance to visit the Caribbean. And I can assure you, with all due respect to my friends from the Caribbean countries, but the Egyptian Caribbean is much more virgin, much more beautiful, and much more attractive. The Red Sea coast and southern Sinai, Hurghada, Ain Sokhna, and southern Sinai, those sites, I'm sure everybody would enjoy, especially those who love diving and snorkeling.
So you mentioned that the northern part of Egypt is a particularly wonderful place to visit. Are those the most popular tourist sites?
I'm speaking about Upper Egypt.
Upper
Egypt
Egypt,
is
yes,
the
northern.
south part of Egypt, not the northern part.
Oh, I'm
Because
sorry.
Egypt is descending from above to below. The above, from the Nile, is coming from above to the Mediterranean. So Upper Egypt is the southern part.
Southern part of Egypt.
Yes.
When we look at the country,
Aswan,
map,
Luxor, Abu Simbel, these are the major touristic sites in the southern part of Egypt, or what we call it Upper Egypt.
it's a little bit confusing for
The
someone.
Nile
like, I haven't
descends
been, right.
from the Ethiopia, which is high, getting down to the Mediterranean, passing through Egypt. It's like a slope.
Right.
So Upper Egypt is up in the south.
Okay. Are there some other sites that are maybe less well known, but you would personally want to recommend?
Yes, of course, of course. And I cannot actually claim that they are less known, because it depends on where is the tourist coming from. For example, there are sites like the oasis in Egypt. For a German tourist, they are familiar and famous, but maybe for a Korean or a Japanese tourist, they are not that famous. Actually, they are very attractive, the oasis area. El Fayoum, one of the oasis also. And Alexandria, the Mediterranean coast of Egypt, is magnificent as well. Of course, southern Sinai, where you can visit St. Catherine's, is very famous. And the Mount Sinai, Mount Moses. And the religious site, I know that many Koreans like to visit Christian sites in Egypt. And I have to tell you that the Christian site, the St. Catherine's Monastery, is not the only Christian monument or in Egypt, but the ancient part of Cairo has the oldest churches in the whole world. One of them is actually dated few years after Christ.
Wow.
That is Al-Mu'allaqa Church, which was built above a Roman citadel, and it is all established on pillars. And this church is 1,950 years old, and I consider it one of the wonders of the world, because it's a huge building based on pillars.
Pillars.
Hanging, in English it's the hanging church.
So all the pillars are exposed. You could see the pillars.
Yes. You can go to the lower part of the church under the ground and watch the pillars.
Why are they on pillars? Why is it on pillars? Because of the citadel?
Because
former-
below the church there is the remains of the Roman ancient citadel. So they decided to lift up the church above this ancient monument.
It's fascinating. Well, to celebrate the lifting of various travel restrictions to Egypt, the Egyptian Tourist Office recently held a reception, and our cameras were there to capture the action. We had a chance to learn all about tourism in Egypt last December. Representatives from Korea's major airlines, travel agencies, and companies, as well as members of the press and government, were all there. The ambassador explained the advantages of Egypt's tourism market and introduced the most attractive destinations in Egypt.
The major purpose of this evening event is that if the Korean tourist is waiting a little bit to visit Egypt, so we decided to bring Egypt to him here inside Korea in order to encourage the retaining, not only the retaining, but also the promotion and the increase of the flow of tourism from Korea to Egypt.
The travel advisory for Egypt was revised recently to reflect updated information. Traveling is now permissible, but there's an emphasis on safety. The head of the Egyptian Tourism Bureau's Asia and Oceania department was there too.
We have two main package for the Korean tourists. The first one, Cairo and Luxor and Aswan and Abu Simbel, to enjoy the Egyptian culture and Egyptian history.
Past and present coexist in Egypt. The sites of ancient Egypt will always draw visitors from around the world, and the tourism industry's growth potential is limitless. So of course, cultural exchanges go both ways, and many Koreans are interested in visiting Egypt, but I also hear that many Egyptians are taking an interest in Korea, in particular K-dramas and K-pop.
Yes, that's right. The the wave, the Korean wave, as you call it,
Hallyu, yeah.
has also invaded the Egyptian cultural market, especially among youth. But I have to say something on this. I mentioned this to distinguished officials in the cultural institutions with whom I had the honor of meeting recently. And that is in the Egyptian market. Many cultures compete. It is a big market of competition between many cultures, many incoming cultures from the whole world, from Europe, from the United States, from the Mediterranean, from the Arab countries, from Africa. So the Korean culture or the Korean wave is actually in this market facing much competition. And this means that Korea is requested to make more effort in order to do the appropriate marketing of your great culture, and particularly the new part of it expressed and reflected in the Korean wave in the Egyptian market. You have to prove yourself there in order to let more and more Egyptians know about Korea.
So we need to market Korean culture much
Exactly.
more actively.
Exactly.
What parts of Korean culture do you think would particularly be competitive or of interest to Egyptians?
Well, Egyptians are people of civilization and history. When we see other civilizations sharing their handicrafts, for example, sharing their kind of literature, of course, once translated to our Arabic language, that helped us as Egyptians to get in depth of the Korean society and the conscience of the Korean people, to understand them more. So I think the field of literature is very important, and the field of expressing the artifacts is also another way to invade the hearts of the Egyptian people.
What about Korean food? Do you think Korean food could become popular?
Korean food could become popular, but it will get into severe competition with the Chinese and the Japanese food, which came there before the Korean food. So you will have to exert more and more effort in order to market the Korean food. But I can anticipate you that you will succeed in this respect, because Korean food, as I tried it, is lighter and healthier.
So then I have to ask you, what's your favorite dish so far of Korean food?
Well, actually, maybe you will be surprised, but it is kimchi.
Not bibimbap, not kalbi. But kimchi, we're talking about red, fiery, spicy kimchi.
Exactly, I love it.
Wow.
And it's not elsewhere in the world.
From
This
your
is
first bite, you
very
fell in
unique,
love?
yes.
Love at first bite.
Mhm. I tried it only when I came for the first time in late 2012 to visit Korea. And actually I was surprised and I fell in love with it.
So you have kimchi in the fridge at the Egyptian ambassador's
Yes, I
residence.
almost visited the storage places for kimchi. And when they put it in barrels and I had photos with the barrels of kimchi.
That's amazing. Well, I hear there's actually quite a lot of similarities between Korean and Egyptian cultures. For example, the reverence or the respect that we pay towards our elders. Is that right?
That's right. And our two countries actually share many, not only this value, human value, but also I was surprised to know that the Korean youth, man and woman, they stay with their parents until they get married. And this is actually contradictory to what happened in almost all the industrial communities. This happens in Egypt. In Egypt, people stay with their parents until the last moment. So this is actually very useful. They take care of their parents. And that's something I respect a lot. So this is one. And also respecting the elders is another one. Family ties is another one. But most important, I think that the Korean people share with us one important human rather than cultural value, that you are very warm people and forthcoming towards a foreigner, welcoming to a foreigner. This is something that we respect a lot and appreciate a lot.
That's a wonderful quality too, isn't it? Well, let's talk about some worries then in common as well. You mentioned youth. Korean youth, of course, are very anxious. We're schooled from a very young age to succeed, especially at school. It's regarded as a basic necessity for succeeded in life, but once we graduate from university that we tried so hard to enter, there's not always that many jobs that we want to actually take on. Are there similar futures about, similar worries about the future among Egyptian youth as well?
The Egyptian youth we are speaking of today are different from the Egyptian youth few years ago. Few years ago, an Egyptian youth would share the same concerns once he's graduated from the university, how he would establish his career, get employed, get enough revenue in order to establish his family life, to have a home, a good job, and a good life. I would lie if I say that this is not the case today. It is the case, but the difference is that this is not the only concern of the Egyptian youth. Because the Egyptian youth now is a youth who produced 2 revolutions in less than 3 years. So these are people who are looking for a better future for their society, for their community, for their country, for their nation, for their people. They have aspirations and hopes about the future which surpass the individual aspirations of a better life for one person. They dream of a democratic nation. They are getting it. They dream of social justice. They are getting it. Before that, they were impatient. Now they are patient because they made this. So they have to wait until the farm produces its product.
Wow, that's very philosophical. Okay, well now let's shift tracks. Until the 1970s, North Korea was your closer ally, let's say, than South Korea, with Egypt, of course. What caused the change?
Well, speaking about the history of our relations with North Korea, as you know, political choices respond to the political philosophy which make those choices, which guide those choices. In the 50s and the 60s, Egypt was attempting to establish a sort of a socialist country. And at that time, the socialist philosophy was the means to develop the country and to develop the society. So it was normal for the decision maker to get in contact closer with countries which share the same value. But with a change of mentality, a change of thinking, the way of thinking, and the change of the regime, economic regime, and the preferences of the people, the time was ripe where the Egyptians started to think of other parts of the world. So it was due time. In addition to that, you have to know that the Egyptian relations, diplomatic relations, were established with the Republic of Korea in 1995. And you know that this year was actually when the transformation in the world politics was consolidated after the fall of the Berlin Wall. The fall of the Berlin Wall actually was a good occasion for the fall of another wall, another imaginary wall that separated between two worlds. So it was normal for Egypt to stretch a hand towards the Republic of Korea as well. But I have to say that Egypt recognized Korea as one nation in 1948. And in 1961, we established consular relations with the Republic of Korea. And establishing consular relations from 1961 until the establishment of full diplomatic relations, there was so much interaction in all fields between the two countries. So the establishment of full diplomatic relations in 1995, I claim, was only officializing something which already existed on the ground. Speaking again about the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, like Korean people in the north and in the south, Egyptians have a very deep feeling of appreciation to whoever stretch a hand of help to these people. We in Egypt, we remember with appreciation that this country stood by us in one of our most important and critical times of our modern history during the October War. The kind of support and sustenance that we get from this country is for us unforgettable. For this reason, we keep our contacts, we keep our relations, and also, not only for this reason, but because we also believe, as you believe and as I, when in several visits to Korean institutions and with politicians, you believe a lot in unification.
Yes.
So if you here in the South believe in the unification, so we in Egypt as well believe in it. So we are dealing equally with the North and with the South. And we hope that one day we may be a bridge between the two countries to return back as one nation again.
Okay. Well, you mentioned that we had friendly relations before the formal establishment of diplomatic ties in
Yes.
95. But 95 must have also been a moment where we can take those relations to another level.
That's
What
right.
are some of the advances that bilateral relations took after the formal establishment of diplomatic ties?
Well, let me tell you something about the modern times, about the actual times. Before being privileged to come as ambassador of my country in your country, I was appointed as Deputy Assistant Foreign Minister for East Asia in the headquarters, and I stayed in that position for 3 years. In this position, I was taking care of the files of relations between Egypt, the Korean Peninsula, North and South, Japan, and China. So I was very close to the developments in the relations with the Republic of Korea. And I witnessed that a big development and progress happened actually between the two countries, started from 2010, when the peak of relations and commercial interaction between the two countries reached actually a level of more than $3 billion. And this was a new development in the traditional course of international economic and commercial relations of Egypt. But later, we started to activate existing files. In 2012, we had a very important event, and that was the second round of consultations between the ministers of finance of the two countries. in February 2013, we had an important visit of the Korean Fund for Development. And for the first time, we started to discuss practically projects for cooperation between the two countries in various critical fields for Egypt, like the field of renewable energy, nuclear energy, of course the peaceful use of nuclear energy for development, electricity, telecommunications, but above all, science and technology, the application of science and technology in the field of industry, capacity building and training for the Egyptian manpower. Since then, I can say that the developments between the two countries paved the way to a real strategic partnership that would be equally and mutually beneficial for the two nations and for the two peoples. We are looking forward to enhance and get along with this partnership and reap the fruits out of it for the benefit of both of us.
Is this the framework agreement that was made to boost cooperation in 5 fields in particular?
This is one of the existing contractual frameworks, but furthermore, the ex-Minister of Foreign Affairs of Egypt in March 2012 signed with his Korean counterpart an agreement to establish a joint ministerial committee for political, economic and technical cooperation between the two countries. And this is actually where the officials from both governments specialized in all aspects of cooperation can sit together in order to coordinate a better development of the relations in their fields.
So all of these agreements have led the way for easier investment from not only Egyptian investors, but also, of course, Korean people wanting to enter the Egyptian market.
We are very proud to have many distinguished and significant Korean investments in Egypt. Above all, to mention Samsung. And Samsung established one of its rare factories to produce LCDs outside Korean soil. And that is in the city of Bani Suef in Upper Egypt. And this is not a simple investment. It is an investment which has a lot of significance for us, because this is the first time when a Korean investment establishes an R&D center in its enterprise offshore. So we really appreciate this, and we are trying to speak to the rest of the world to copy the Korean model in this aspect.
What do you think was the biggest attraction for Samsung in making this investment decision? The manpower? What do you think was the greatest factor?
Well, it is the same reason why Egypt has always been attractive to foreign investments. The geopolitical and strategic position of Egypt as in the center of the world, as a hub to Africa, to the Middle East, to Arab countries, to Southern Europe, the Suez Canal, the infrastructure available in Egypt. We started our open door policy and to attract foreign investments since 1974. So we have an established tradition in the field of attracting foreign investments. And we are providing incentives which are very attractive to the whole world. Of course, manpower is one of the reasons why Egypt is very much attractive to foreign investments, but this is no more the major reason. Other reasons are the infrastructure already established, the roads, the Suez Canal has been also developed as an international logistic and commercial area for the whole world. So there are many attractions actually, among them of course the investment incentives, which are very generous, provided to the foreign investors.
Well, I'm talking with Dr. Hani Selim, the Egyptian ambassador to Korea, and we'll be right back after this.
the Arabic accent of the North Africans. Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, Libya. It's very difficult for us to understand. We all speak Arabic, but with different accents. The Egyptian accent is the most popular and most famous. Everybody in the Arab world can understand it.
I did not know that.
Ambassador, in 2011, a resource room dedicated to Korean materials was inaugurated at the National Library and Archives in Cairo, Egypt. I heard this is the first documentary or archive room of its kind in Africa. What is the significance of that, do you think?
Well, the significance of that is that speaking about culture is very significant in the case of Egypt and in the case of Korea. And this has been actually my philosophy since I came to this country, that culture is the gateway to establish good relations and to develop those relations in all other fields, but particularly between countries like ours, like Egypt and like Korea. Countries with history, countries with civilization, they share cultural values. Culture would be the right way in order to establish real partnership between nations and between people. Egypt is a pivotal cultural hub in its area. For the Arab world, for Africa, for the South Mediterranean, Egypt has always been an important central medium power in this field. So whatever culture would come to our country, it will find its way elsewhere in the world through the bridge of Egypt. So I'm sure that this occasion is another occasion where Korea would make use of its partnership with Egypt in order to market itself as a culture, as a value to the rest of the world through Egypt.
And are you planning any events or maybe some projects here in Korea to better promote Egyptian culture to the Korean public?
Of course, among the first courtesy visits I made since I came were visits to the cultural institutions. And I was very much impressed by the quality of people I met with in those institutions. The reason why I made this choice, besides my belief, as I have just mentioned, that culture is the gateway to develop relations in other fields, the idea is to establish real partnerships between the two countries in the field of culture, between cultural institutions, including as well the academic institutions, universities, and think tanks. I believe that this is the right way to establish real partnership between two countries, particularly like Egypt and Korea.
So my natural question would be, for your stay here in Korea, which is 4-year term, what are the areas that you really want to be concentrating on? What is your goal for your stay here?
Well, as ambassador representing my country, like any other ambassador, it is in the rules of diplomacy, I should be focusing on the major interests of my country and my nation. At this moment, in Egypt, we are focusing on the economic development of Egypt. And I firmly believe that in Korea, there is a huge and ample chance to envisage and to learn and to share expertise and experience in various fields of economic development. I have to tell you that I have always been impressed about the development of your country. All the countries in the world which were destroyed in wars and were able to recuperate after the war and return back as a big country, they are different. If we speak about Germany, if we speak about Japan, those countries had their infrastructure and their power before the war. So after destruction, they had a chance to resurrect. But when I look at Korea, before the war, Korea was the second poorest country in the world. They had nothing. And the war came to finish even the rest of whatever existed. And then in 10 years or 15 years after the war, Korea is among the big 15 economies in the world. So if this signifies something to me as an Egyptian, it signifies the kind of people you are, the resilience, the determination in order to resurrect your country from ashes and build a great nation like yours. I'm sure that in the coming years left for me here, I will try my best to invest in this unique experience.
On a personal note, is there something that you would like to achieve while you're stationed here in Korea? I know your role as an ambassador is to do that. On a personal note, is there something that you would like to achieve, or something that you're looking forward to in particular?
Actually, on a personal note, I studied my postgraduate studies in Switzerland. I got my PhD from the University of Freiburg in the field of international economic relations. But I have always been dreaming of getting a PhD in political science, because I have my master in political science. And after those few months I spent in your country and learning a lot about the academic value of your think tanks and the universities, so I think that I have to consider applying for a PhD program in one of your universities.
Would you have time, Mr. Ambassador?
Well, as a boss, I can always create my time.
Because it didn't seem like you had much time. But I wish you the best of luck, and I hope you'll
Thank
also
you.
visit us again. Thank you for sparing time to come visit us here today.
Thank you very much. Very kind of you.
Thank you. And that was our conversation with His Excellency Dr. Hani Selim, the Egyptian ambassador to Korea. You can watch a repeat of this program on our homepage, arirangtv.com. Please join us again next time. Until then, bye-bye.